Everyone, welcome to the Potomac River Jazz Club's monthly jazz featuring Don Vappie, which is very exciting. I love Don. I think I love it. He's an amazing storyteller, amazing musician. Important to me, a man of principle, and so I'm very just happy that we're hosting him for a talk. I know most of you either know his background or read his biography, so I'm not going to go through the entire thing because I can gush about him for hours. But we're in good hands with someone who knows music history, knows instruments, and many decades of music that can really speak to the topic that we're doing today. So I'm going to hand things off to him. First on, I am going to spotlight you to make sure that the camera stays on you the whole time. And remembering everybody that we need all of these microphones to stay muted. And when Don is ready to take some questions, we'll let people unmute and do some discussions and such. So take it away, Don.
All right. Well, here I am. Hello, everybody. I'm Don Vappie. I'm at home, and this is my piano behind me. But I, when I talked to Ellie, I came up with this title of Contemporary Value of Early Jazz because I find the more I get to play, the more everything is so related. So I'm going to start there. I came up really starting to play music in the late 60s, early 70s. And my first gig, I was 15 years old. I was playing on Bourbon Street. We had a fake ID, but I looked old. So back then, you could get a fake ID on Canal Street right next to Lee's Shoes. You could go in and tell the guy how old you were, and he'd print it up for you. So anyway, but I'm going to really shorten that part of it. I played in funk bands, top 40 music bands. We were really popular. I think the band's still around. It's called Track One. And I did all these different kinds of jobs. And here's something people don't realize. Each top 40 bands of the 70s, no matter in New Orleans, no matter which band it was, everyone had to know some early New Orleans jazz or traditional jazz, as it's called so much now. But because of the types of functions we would play for, we'd play these social club parties, and each party would have a call out, and the call out is what they that was what they the name they gave to the introduction of the members. And there was a format to that. We'd play a march like that kind of march. It's a real march kind of thing. Anyway, we'd do that, and the people would march around the room, and they would get introduced and march around. That would become a second line. When everyone was introduced, the band would stop, and the whole club, this is the president, blah 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 blah, and it's like, then it would become a second line where all the guests of all the members, all the club members, could join in on this second line parade around the room. And we do something like Bourbon Street Parade or something like that. And from there, that's when we would start playing whatever was popular at the time, whether it was Earth, Wind, and Fire or Maze or whatever it was, and the dance began. So, and people were still doing, we still had a variety of ages. We had an age range of, 30 to 80, or and up. And so we had to know some waltzes. We had to know some standards. We played Misty. We played things like that. We played old time blues tunes. So, and all of this is really connected to the earliest music in New Orleans, the earliest stuff, the Buddy Bolden stuff, the King Oliver stuff. I mean, even today, we still play Canal Street Blues. That was 1923, the King Oliver Band. And that's what this is 20, it's 101 years ago. So it's like the whole New Orleans thing, it never really, one thing doesn't stop and it becomes something else. It just adds on to it. And speaking of adding on, a huge influence of what we do comes from the Caribbean, with really Haiti. And Haiti has this rhythm that continues to be dominant in New Orleans music, no matter what year it is, even today. And this is the rhythm. It's called the Triseo rhythm. That's the rhythm. So you can hear it in Hey Pocky way, that kind of thing. That kind of thing. And it's just there. It's in all kinds of stuff. And which that comes from the Meters, that. And we still look up to the Meters as a traditional jazz band, right? The Meters. They were in the 60s. So and it's interesting because Taylor Swift had a song called Trouble, and the bridge did that same rhythm. It's like trouble. And I thought, man, everybody's taking New Orleans and not giving New Orleans credit. So that's how I tie all this stuff together. And even when I got to play, I guess this would have been in the 1980s, I got to play at Preservation Hall a little bit. And a lot of the musicians were still some of the older guys like Willie and Percy Humphrey, Chester Zardis, Jeanette Kimball, Louis Nelson. So it's, Kid Chic, Sadie Cola. So I remember playing one time because playing banjo, going from guitar to banjo, and by the way, I started string instrument wise, I started on bass just because I love the bass. But I started on piano and then trumpet in school, and you learn music and then you can apply it to whatever instrument you want. So I'm playing with Willie Humphrey and I'm playing this Freddie Green kind of comp. It's kind of short. That kind of thing. Well, Willie Humphrey says, he turns to me, and he was like either 90 or 89 or maybe 91. He says, I'm sitting right next to him. He's sitting right here on my right. And he goes, young man, I'm used to hearing the banjo ring. And I respect my elders. I said, yes, sir, Mr. Humphrey, you got it. And I did that, which was fine. I mean, whatever you do, you have to make it. And I remember going to his funeral. His wife said, Mr. Vappie, my husband loved you. I loved him too. He's really great. He played at the World Series where there was the betting incident. That was some famous incident where it was like rigged or somebody was betting. He played that game. He was in the band. But things like that make me realize that there's just not that much difference. There's a whole lot of value from the early music into the older music. And my recommendation, if you want to play any style you play, you start where you are and then you incrementally move forward or backward. I didn't just jump from, like I played, what was it earlier? Simple song from Sly and the Family Stone. I didn't go right from that back to King Oliver. I worked my way back because then you get to understand how the little subtleties in the groove evolve. And you can go back and find that they're basically not that different. One of the people I mentioned was Papa Charlie Jackson. He was in the 30s. He was a big star for, I think it was Paramount Records. It was during the segregated race records kind of thing. And he had people like Ma Rainey were guests on his recordings. But he did this Scoodlum Scoo song, it's like, what was it? She doesn't know what to do. She said, right over there, sweet mom. I'm gonna tell you just what to do. I'm gonna tell you just before you go. That kind of thing. But on the bridge of that tune, he did this totally James Brown thing. It was like, what was it? Scoodlum Scoo, 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 and the bridge. That's the same one as James Brown would do, like hot pants. It's the same rhythms, the same rhythm in all of James Brown stuff, It might move it around a beat or so, but it's the same groove. And we're talking 1930s to 1960s. So, which when I say it like that, it's not that far away. So, and that speaks to my age. I'm like, geez, I'm 68 years old. Can't believe it. So that's what I mean by things being kind of the same. And even I remember guys, we would play gigs, and sometimes the melody might be on an extension on the chord that was more than just a dominant 7 or a major 7. It might be a 13 or a 13 with a sharp 11 or something. And sometimes the piano player or the guitar player would play that, and the horn player would get really upset. He says, hey, we're playing traditional jazz. They didn't play those kinds of chords. And I'm thinking to myself, man, Sidney Bechet implied that shit. Oh, excuse me, I'm on TV. Sidney Bechet implied that stuff way back then. So it's not like, what's the surprise, Play a third. Like what's the tune? Right? That's a 13 chord. That's a 7. We might play it. It's F7. So, in other words, instead of the guitar player playing this, if he was like really being, I can't think of another word. If he was being anal about it, he'd say, play an F7. You wouldn't want him to play. So anyway, that's what I mean by contemporary value of early jazz. It's all there. It's all kind of the same stuff. And just to go back and just acknowledge some of the influences that came into New Orleans for jazz to form. We had the Caribbean, which I mentioned, Haiti, French, a lot of French, European, a lot of it's French, but a lot of it's Italian. We had a lot of African, by way of Africa, by way of the Caribbean. We had South American, which South America had some of the same influences of Spanish and Portuguese, German, Italian. So like I wrote a tune on my album called Color of Creole, which is sort of tribute to the Brazilian choro, because the choro had the same form, same construction as some early New Orleans tunes, like to say High Society. You had you had that part there. I'm probably in the wrong key, but it's and then you had that part. Then you went to then it was like that part. Then they had this da 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 da. That's another part. Then he went back to this other part. Well, that's kind of what a choro does. It's like A B B A C. It had the same kind of form, the sections. So I wrote this tune, which is the A section, and then the B section is. Then you go back to the other section, which is I forgot the tune. And then it goes back to the C section, which is. And that kind of goes like that. So it's that kind of form thing. And, you know, the thing about New Orleans jazz is things kind of evolved, and New Orleans jazz stayed really popular on a global level. But it kind of stayed to where people just play it. These are the songs we play all the time as part of this repertoire, which is fine. I have no beef with that at all. What I do think can be interesting is to continue to develop new songs and new material using those basic, that form and some of the basic elements that were there, that existed in that style of playing. So that's where I come in with that tune. Or like another tune I did called, I forget the name of my songs here.
Hey folks, yeah, that's what I figured. I think Don is frozen. He will figure that out, I think soon. I'm going to let me see if I can ping him on that. We love technical difficulties. But of course, there we go. Can't hear you yet. No sound. Yep. He's fixing that up, folks.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Sorry about that.
I guess
I'll move this.
the internet just wanted to block you out in the middle of your song.
They didn't like my songs, man.
Right?
It's like,
Right?
could be some copyright protection that's protecting me from playing my stuff.
Your own song, exactly. I'm gonna remute and hand it back.
Okay. So did you hear that last thing I did?
We heard you playing the song. Like
Yeah, I was like, that what I came up with that based on a Jelly Roll Morton song, which was like it was, I think it was called Hyena Stomp or something. It was like laughing, that kind of thing. But anyway, that was one of my inspirations for that. But I really enjoyed writing in the style. So I'm looking forward to possibly doing more in the style. But I'm not afraid of incorporating the early style with maybe new innovations that we have now, new harmonies or more complex harmonies or just, I don't know, rhythms and harmonies don't have to be complex. Sometimes young musicians think, well, I got to play fast or I got to play like this or these weird, C7 discombobulated 11. And, it's, no, you got to make sense. You got to play something that makes sense. So that's kind of where I am. But I just said a whole bunch. So let me just give you some history on me way back in my family. Some of this early stuff I talked about with Buddy Bolden, actually. My great uncle, my grandmother's brother, had a barbershop. He and his brother, the brothers had a barbershop that was next door to Buddy Bolden. So this was late 1800s. Probably I'd put money on that Buddy Bolden was in there because the story is that there was a blackboard up there where musicians would meet there, musicians of color, black musicians, Creole, whatever. And if you needed a trumpet player, they'd write it up on the board and that kind of thing. So it was like an early version of a union, I guess. So that's so interesting. I learned about that in Don Marquis' book about Bolden. And but growing up, my grandmother, they listened to everything. There was no distinction between, I mean, they had records that they liked, they had a record player. Because my first record she gave me was a 78, and it was Ella Fitzgerald and Chick Webb doing Tisket a Tasket. But my favorite track was the flip side, which was Liza, Let the Clouds Roll Away. And when I was like, what, 5, 6, 7 years old, I had my little Decca record player, one at a time. And I'd play that song, and it just sent chills down my back, like my spine would tingle. Da 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 da. And the whole band was like da 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 ba 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 da ba da 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 da, and it would come down. It was like so cool. So here I am, 50 years later, 60 years later. I play that tune in my band, and we're going to play it this year at Jazz Fest coming up in 25, because I try to do it every year. I do my own arrangements for my group because I have to write them to fit the instrumentation I have. And one of my best arranging teachers was a guy named Ed Frank, great pianist. He had a stroke, so he played with one hand. I don't forget which, I think it was his left hand. But he sounded like he had two hands. But we were walking down the street, and I'm like, Ed, can you give me some arranging lessons? He said, yeah. Anything you write down is better than nothing. And then he turned the corner on me. So that was my start at arranging. So I got to do some stuff for Jazz at Lincoln Center, some Jelly Roll Morton things. And I had to transcribe what Jelly Roll played. So, and the thing is, folks, I'm telling you, if you want to do something, just try and write it down. And even if you get it wrong, the fact that you wrote it down and you come back to it a couple of weeks later and you listen to it and you play it and you say, oh, wait, that's not exactly right. You're developing your ear. And that's how that works. That's just how it works. So I encourage all of you to just go for it, man. Do your thing. But anyway, getting back to my family, my great uncle had that barbershop and he played bass. And I knew that as a young man, as a child, actually, because I remember going to his funeral, and my mother said he was a bass player. And since then, I've heard stories from Richard Moten's mother. I don't know if y'all know Richard Moten. Well, Richard's my cousin, and his mother, Marie, taught me piano when I was like 6. And it didn't, it didn't take, but I got a puppy out of the deal. So, but, I remember a lot of what she taught me. And she told a story about the family, my grandmother and all the siblings, and how I think Papa John, the bass player, he might have got hold of a clarinet or a saxophone. I think it was a clarinet. And one of the brothers named Willie, his nickname was Kaiser. He was killed in the 1950s on Ferret Street, a hit and run accident. But he worked out on the West Coast. Well, and he's on some early recordings too, Willie Joseph. And he played clarinet, but they said, because the whole family played string instruments. So with Willie, they made Willie go out in the cornfield, way out in the cornfield, because the clarinet, when he was learning, was such an awful sound. Now, and I thought that was great. All these string players sending the clarinet player out, go practice out there in the cornfield. Because a violin can be pretty awful too if you squeaking and stuff. But that's one of the stories I heard from Marie. But it was really great. They played music every Sunday. They got together and had dinner, lunch or whatever, and they would play music. That was their entertainment. And they played for dances out in the country. I'm saying the country, west of New Orleans, where they were from, along River Road back there. They play these dances, and you can listen to the oral history of Papa John Joseph at the Hogan Archives. He talks about playing mazurkas and different waltzes and different kinds of dances for these things. He says you had to know how to play everything. So it was really exciting to read that. And one thing that's not really that part of this, but when I got to tour in Japan, I was in Kobe, Japan, and my Japanese handler knew my family history. I'm like, this guy's knowing people. I don't know all these people, but he knew Papa John. He understood. He knew the whole thing. It's amazing how we've allowed certain aspects of our society to suppress things because they didn't fit the, whatever. So I'm done with that. So some of these early musicians, I got to tell you, some of my favorite clarinet players were people like Omar Simeon. I loved him. Albert Nicholas was one of the great ones. Some of the Creole music that I play is directly from Albert Nicholas and Danny Barker. Johnny St. Cyr was one of my favorite banjo players, and he played a 6-string banjo. But it's not that the banjo he played, it's the types of things he did. Like he might play something like, he would do those bass lines mixed in there. And it might have been a necessity thing because the recording technology couldn't really pick up the low frequencies of the bass. So that's why you don't really hear a bass on some of those real early recordings. In fact, that's why you hear the wood block as opposed to the snare drum, because of the wood block occupied a smaller frequency and could fit into the mix a little better. So there's a reason for those things. And so when you're trying to recreate something, I guess what I'm saying is don't be too harsh or too, well, they did it like this on the record. Well, yeah, because they had to. So that's why you got to keep in mind the technology at the time. But I remember my Creole blues record, we played some songs from the Astoria Hot Eight. We played a tune called Damp Weather. I thought there's so many great jazz bands. It's a shame that we only really heard the ones that got famous, like King Oliver. I mean, there were others, you know. I mean, some of these songs are just, they're just exciting. I mean, Damp Weather was one of them that we played, and I'm trying to remember all the others. I should have looked at them before I came on here to talk to you so I could remember. But I mean, tunes like the one that reminded me of the Egypt. It's like, you know, that kind of stuff. Those kinds of tunes. There's a lot of really cool stuff that happened with those bands, and the instrumentation and the way they use their instruments. And one thing that I actually talked to Wynton Marsalis about this. The collective improvisation is something that I don't know why, but it never really, it kind of morphed into one person taking a solo and everybody sitting back and checking it out. But I understand that because Armstrong was so talented and gifted with his melodic improvisation that everyone wanted to do what he did. But I mean, at the same time, the collective improvisation in the early jazz in New Orleans is really, it's really genius for me. Everybody playing at the same time, but complementing each other, not getting in the way, complementing, not interfering with anyone else's. I mean, what a great, what a great example for democracy. Everybody talking and respecting each other's space, you know? I mean, hey, c'est la vie. So, and there were places that, you know, now that I'm talking about that, there were places where bands could play, which was great. And that's, fortunately in New Orleans, we still have venues that we can play in. But, you know, I'm thinking about like Economy Hall, which I really knew nothing about until Jazz Fest has a tent called Economy Hall. And I didn't even put it together because, you know, you're so busy trying to live, it's hard to go back and look for those things. So, but that's one of them. I had no idea there was a place called I think it's the Pythian Temple, or it might be Pythian Temple. It's Pythian. I had no idea this even existed. And it was an affluent organization of people of color, black people. And it's a shame we don't know about all those things, because one of my pet peeves is that we have all these different history months. And I think Black history is American history. All history in America is American history. So let's acknowledge all of it. That way we don't have to just put a month aside for one of them, for one group or another. It's all, we're all sharing this. It's our history. And I would really hope we come to a point in time where Black history is celebrated by everyone in America, because then you'll understand the music. We'll all understand the music better. We can all share our shared cultures. I mean, yes, a lot of bad stuff happened, but you know, we don't get past it until we acknowledge it and then, you know, breathe it together, man. go through it. I'm just talking away. Should I ask about questions or anything? Or
I have a couple of questions that popped up. What once we were talking about Richard and bass playing, and he's one of my favorite bass players. Really, I love that man. Anyway, I know when you and I were talking about ideas of topics and centering, that you had talked about how more modern, I say modern, 60s 70s bass playing really patterned itself after part of what the banjo was doing, and you did sort of mention the St. Cyr playing the bass
yeah,
line and stuff with that. So that was one question, is if you could explain that a little bit more and maybe play some examples for us. And then
right.
second question, and then you can attack them as you will. um Brass bands nowadays, right? We've got the traditional Storyville stompers, and then we got the young fellas, and we got Rebirth, some of the big name popular ones that really have taken early traditional things and sort of run them into a new modern form. And I just wanted to hear your take about all of that too. So I'm going to mute and let you address those.
Okay. So I'll go to the bass thing first because that bass was my major when I went to college for music, which I unfortunately didn't finish the formal study, but bass was my main instrument, and I still love it. But what I realized is I got by playing banjo, and I got to play with a number of African musicians from Mali, from Senegal, and I noticed I didn't understand African music. So I listened to what they're doing, and they're playing things like, and that'll be like the A section of a song, and they'll sing their or tell the story that they want to tell. And what we might have with different chord changes to a bridge, they will go to something different, like maybe uh, a different modal kind of thing. And they go back to this section. So what this reminded me of is that these melodic figures sort of define the song, if I'm call it a song. It could be the type of thing that's going on at that moment in some of the African music. And I thought, geez, this is a recurring melody here. And it reminded me of the bass lines in the 60s and the 70s, and actually probably in the 80s. But I mean, a song like, well, songs, well, Brick House. She's a brick, dum, 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 house, That's a repetitive line that goes over and over, and it defines the song. Or like this other song, you know, I'll take you there. That's it. Banjo's totally tuned different than bass, and my muscle memory kicks in every now and then. But I mean, that's really interesting to me, how that African aspect of having that repetitive line over and over that drives the song, that drives the message, happens in soul music. uh, a lot of tunes. It's always the bass that kind of drives that, and the guitar will play like, and the guitar will be playing that kind of thing, like that just that little rhythm. Everybody has a role to play. And speaking of role to play, that's something else I learned by coming back to early jazz. It really taught me how to be a better band player because everyone has a role to play inside the ensemble. And when you're doing collective improvisation, you can't just do whatever you want. You have to respect your place in that situation and respect other people's place in the situation. So even playing in a funk band in the 70s or the 80s, it really helped me to not want to just go out and do whatever I want because I wanted to, because I want to play this because I can, or because it's so hip to play this line. I have to play my part for the good of the ensemble. I, that's a really good lesson I learned playing early jazz on that. I hope I addressed most of that stuff for you.
Yeah, definitely. And then the brass band thing.
The brass band thing. The brass bands, uh, I think the brass bands today are an extension of what we had as a school band when I was growing up. We had every school had a band program, a music program. And we got to play in the ensembles in our schools. We learned the hot cross buns and all that kind of stuff. And even some of the band directors would go that extra mile and teach us popular tunes of the time. Like there was a song called The Horse, I remember because I was playing trumpet. Uh, da, 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 da. You remember that? Anyway, that was popular back then. This band director brought it in. We were all excited. But at the same time, we learned how to play second line because we could hear it. We were being taught music. We were playing music and learning harmony through playing melodies of songs and we started hearing, hey, oh, this is similar to this or similar to that. So we would start playing second line on our own. That kind of thing. And we would learn that, we would hear it. It was like learning a language. You hear it, you start to speak, then you can start to learn new words and new phrases. Well, today we have brass bands, and the young brass band players, I think it would even be better if we still had music in the schools. That was a really strong program. But that has really been a big help to keeping music alive in the city, to fostering learning among a lot of students. They learn to play these tunes, and now they sort of play the pop tunes of the time, and they just, it's a shame that I guess my generation didn't do a great job of trying to pass on some of the traditional marches like High Society or Panama or different things like that. I mean, I got no excuse for that. We just maybe didn't do it. I don't know why. But it's the fact that they go out there and they do it. And I think one of the inspirations for that is the Dirty Dozen Dirty Dozen Brass Band. They were like, I think, one of the first to come out and really play sort of mixed pop music with that brass band format. And even now, they sometimes they'll mix in an electric guitar or something like that. And because, I mean, it goes back to what I said earlier. None of that can exist in a vacuum. You can't just say, "Well, I play traditional jazz and I play funk jazz. I play this. I play modern jazz. I play." No, you play music, and there's all these different styles, and whether you know it or not, you can play these other things. It's just a matter of listening and applying and learning new phrases or learning a new feel and how to do it. So that's it's really important that these guys have had these opportunities. And there have been organizations that have been able to provide them with instruments, especially after Katrina. We had organizations doing that. So I hope I answered that one.
Yeah, and going back to what you said about learning something and then moving backwards, and learning some of the roots, I think bringing incorporating some of the more modern songs that the young people are familiar with and playing
Yes,
them in those formats can very often then again bring them back to the roots of where all that came from, which perpetuates the early jazz that we all that we're talking about, and
sure.
that basis for what the contemporary is, right? You go
Right.
back and learn where all that. Oh, 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 oh. Mute, mute,
That's
mute.
all right.
There we go.
Speaker going in.
um, yeah, so
Yeah.
I've always kind of found that interesting, and also just interesting when you think about the people in some of those. I'm going to call them modern brass bands just to differentiate, although brass band is brass band, but just to
Yeah.
differentiate. And for anyone who is super familiar with New Orleans would know this, but if not, you don't realize that you're seeing this brass band doing these modern songs, and then the next day you might see them in a club playing really straight like trad based music. They some
Right.
of them can play it all. They really can
Right.
play it all.
Right.
But yeah, I in my head I just see that some of the youth will come back and learn those roots as they get more embroiled in the music.
Yeah.
Let's open the floor for some other questions and conversation. Feel free to unmute and put a question out there, y'all.
All right. Too late.
All right,
While I'm waiting.
Don White is
Okay.
unmuted. What you got, Don?
Well, it's interesting when he talks about how all this music is cross-pollinated across, different genres. And the last time I was in New Orleans was a long time ago. I went looking for music other than Preservation Hall, and what I ended up finding, I was only there a few days, was one of these modern brass bands. And they were playing some event, and I went to this, and it was like, wow, this is clearly related, but it's not at all traditional
Right.
jazz. So
Yeah.
also what you said, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, it made me think of
What you were about to say.
how, I mean, I haven't been at Preservation Hall for a long time. Uh, I think
Hmm.
maybe early or mid 90s I left.
Well, that was
And
about when I was there.
a few times I've seen, that might be why I left. I mean, we were playing a lot of tunes that, well, there's not a whole lot of guys my age that even know some of them. Wendell Brunius knows more songs than anybody. He's such a fantastic. He just made his birthday. He's 70 years old. Oh man. So, but I mean, he and I, we we did a set. We were in France, and we played. He did cornet chop suey, just banjo and trumpet, and he just really just burned it, man. It was so hip because he could play. He could bring in a few modern day, I'm gonna say phrases, but not really. He just he just played it in a contemporary way, but it still sounded like cornet chop suey. And
That's
I was
yeah.
able to play, you know, and that's what it's supposed to be. You're supposed to keep. It's supposed
Well,
to just keep
well,
it alive. We're not.
th-
That's
this is sort
actually
of yeah,
no. It's one of my criticisms of Preservation Hall.
yeah.
From is that when I was there, or what I noticed, and it may not be like that anymore, or it can't be. What I noticed was it was all about the old guys. Because somebody said to me one time, "Oh, you're too young to be here." I'm like, man, I'm older than the guys were when this music was created. I'm playing this. But they were selling, it was almost like they were, whether it was consciously or not, they were selling old black musicians. And if you weren't old and black, you could be old and white. Then you could be black.
Uh, uh,
So it was like this
yeah,
casting call. And
there's that moldy fig element of purism, and I just see it as all music, it's all interesting. And back in the day, the genres were not as distinct. You have Louis Armstrong dropping in on Jimmy Rogers and making a record with him. You had all kinds
exactly.
of stuff mixing, and New Orleans jazz itself came from the mixture of cultures that was unique to New Orleans.
Agreed.
Could not have happened anywhere else. Didn't happen anywhere else initially. And there is a comment. There's a comment here from one of our other board members about how, part of keeping our organization going is really getting beyond. We've been so focused on it had to come from New Orleans, and well, there's all kinds of stuff. My taste and what I listen to in the wall of hits is right behind the computer here. You know, um, Also, when you mentioned about the recording technology, when we are recreating this music, you have to combine all the elements, maybe sheet music, maybe the recordings, maybe reminiscences of people, and maybe performances made by the same people later on to get the whole picture. You can't just go on the one thing. Well, this is what's on the paper, or this was what's on the record. Because, as you said, there were always reasons why it was the way it was to
Yeah.
get to what do they really sound like live until you get into the 30s where you have things like radio air checks and you can actually compare and the differences can be striking.
Yeah.
So,
And I mean, I like to compare it to languages because if I'm in France, somebody in Paris speaking French to someone that's from anywhere else, they're going to know, or they're Parisian.
right,
Or in America, especially, I mean, if you're in New Orleans, you talk one way, you just go to Lafayette, it's going to be similar, but it's going to be a little different. So it's almost like, can you, do you communicate in the same accent, the same dialect? And so for me, it's like these musical dialects. I mean, when Katrina hit,
right.
and I only use that to say this, when Katrina hit, I just wanted to be around somebody from New Orleans who played music because they understood. I mean, I didn't have to play, I just had to be around them. And the closest I was about 2 hours away from Harry Connick playing a concert somewhere, and Branford was there. And, you know, I drove over to just to say hello, just to hug him. Because we speak the same language, you know?
A quick note about the Prez Hall thing. I see them pretty regularly, both at the hall and when they tour. And at the hall, it still kind of stays more similar, but their touring band is completely different. They have like an amazing variety of arrangements. And Sunpai's son is tours with them sometimes, and he's younger. I don't know if he's in his 20s, but he's a pretty young guy. You know, they have a lot more variety of ages and types of arrangements they're playing, which I find kind of fascinating. But it's only the touring band that does that.
Well, I mean, I wish him well. You know, when I left, I mean, he basically told this guy he needed a flight case. He says, "Call Don. He'll never need his again." So I mean, that's the sort of I'm trying to think of a nice way of putting it. But you know, I don't need you to define me.
Yes,
I
right.
remember I remember asking about a tour. And I said, "Hey man, I've been here a long time. Why can't I do this tour?" And the answer to me was, "Hey man, you got to be patient. Your time is coming." Well, you got a lot of nerve. Tell me my
Mhm.
time is coming. You know? So I'm sorry. I see Michael Gurrier put his hand up in there. So
Yeah,
okay,
let's get
Mike,
Michael in there. Ooh,
unmute.
we can't hear you very well. Oh man, it's so faint.
Is there anyone in New Orleans that's trying to establish the perpetuation of the form like Danny Barker did with his Fairview group? Or is it all, cutthroat and everybody for themselves as opposed to, somebody taking the mantle and trying to move it into the, current generation?
I hear what you're saying, and you know what? I kind of I kind of go with Herbie Hancock on that. Uh, he said jazz is not popular because, and I'm paraphrasing, but it has something to do with people not really wanting to think. And I think that goes for New Orleans jazz as well because we've been a tourist town for a long time. And I remember when I came back, my wife I met her, she was in South Carolina. I moved there. When I came back, I kind of saw it from outside looking in. The the destination management people tell everybody, okay, look, come on down here. You get to hear the Saints go marching in down by the riverside, Bourbon Street Parade. And so that was the songs they wanted us to play all the time. So this to me, it just choked off the creativity and development within the genre. So you got a few people that are trying to continue that, but in terms of in New Orleans, like a Danny Barker, I don't think there's a way that a Danny Barker could exist in today's New Orleans. For one, we don't value music education in our education system, and that's to me that's a loss not just for jazz but just for critical thinking. So
You know,
I
the,
wish I
the,
had a better answer than that.
the United States has always been shall we say, an art depraved country because if you look at Canada, Canada has been supporting the arts for, multiple generations, whereas in the United States, they'd rather spend money on something else than on establishing a music program that'll give the kids their basic, introduction and stimulate, the future development of the form.
Yeah,
But
I
anyway, thank you. Good seeing you.
no, thank you, Mike. That's really great comment because, like I said, I just got back from Denmark, and one thing I noticed when I play in Europe, everybody listens to me play. When I play in New Orleans, people are talking, and I mean, I accept that. I'm playing a gig, and I'm in a place where people are going to talk. I actually had a guy come up to me in a restaurant and say, "Hey, man, we'll, we'll give you $20 to take a break." And I told the guy, I said, "Look, man," I said, I appreciate your comment because now I'm old enough to tell you how I really feel. Do you realize how insulting you are and how ignorant a request that is?" Well, we're trying to have a conversation. I said, what am I going to say? He doesn't even know that I'm not blowing my horn, but I'm a guy, I've been all over the world. I'm a world-class musician. And he's like, "Hey man,
Lack
we
of
trying to
etiquette.
talk." And he could go outside and talk. If you don't want to hear the music, don't pay to come in. Anyway, I'm going off now. But I'm trying not trying to keep that little man inside.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um, talking about the creativity though, I mean, your Blue Book of Storyville CD, I mean, that really is a nod, a contemporary nod to the early traditions.
Thank you.
I mean,
And
that
it
I think that CD is fabulous. I don't know if other people on the Zoom have heard it, but I highly recommend it because that I mean that really. Why don't you talk a little bit about that record?
Well, one thing I can tell you, which kind of backs up what we've been talking about, it was the number one jazz record in 2020 in the Times in London. So that's a really good reason for me to move to Europe. I can, like the guy told me, he said, man, if you come over here, we'll play concerts, not gigs. And he's right. And for a banjo to be the lead instrument on an album that got a top jazz rate, I mean, I was just really, I was surprised, I was in awe, I was delighted, I was excited. I did put special time into that because I wanted it to mean something. I researched to do an album that would focus on things that happened in New Orleans in this area over the last 300 years. And I looked at events, experiences, and that's what came out. One of them was the Blue Book of Storyville is actually about the Blue Book, which was a book that listed all of the prostitutes that worked in all of the brothels in Storyville. And I didn't make it, like a lewd or, shake your booty kind of thing. I mean, geez, I tried to be sensitive about it. It existed. There's one line in there I really love. Jolie Fee lets out a sigh because everything starts over again. I mean, it's true. And like the color of Creole has multiple meanings for me. Creole is a culture for me. It's not a color. But because of our history of color coding everything, they say, oh, you're not black, you Creole, or you're trying to escape being black or Creole. They said that about Jelly Roll Morton. Like, he was struggling with his blackness. The man was trying to play the piano. So, I mean, color of Creole for me is a tribute to the influences that help foster the environment for jazz to be created, which is similar to the choro in Brazil. And plus, the banjo gets to play this lead, which is more of a Caribbean thing. Then the banjo gets to play the lead melody, because banjos played melodies, man. It played little melodic things. It's a great melodic instrument. The tune, La Jolie Fille, that's a tribute to the Tin Roof Blues and Albert Nicholas Creole Blues. Banjo can bend strings and talk too, like a guitar. So, and the jolie fille, pourquoi vous pas viens ici? And that's very New Orleans. Fats Domino was fluent in Creole. Nobody knew that because he was rock and roll, but he was fluent in Creole. And in reading about it, I realized a lot of darker skinned people in Louisiana prefer the term Creole because it identifies them. It's a more correct cultural identification. Black people, that's an American thing, all this racial segregation and stuff. We're human. We have cultural designations. So, but I'm getting upset. They're pushing my button, man.
Well, but all of that matters. All of that matters.
It does.
Yeah.
And that's like saying it. But in my life, I was offered a gig and then told I couldn't do it because it had to be an all-white band. This is in the 1970s, you know? But, and then what, that didn't make me mad. What really upset me was the guy that told me that tells me, oh, well, that's just the way it is. You need to accept that. Really? Come on now. So, I'm just saying all of us we are a sum of our life's experiences. So I've managed to not be overly angry at those things. But anger can eat you up. And I've
It's,
had a lot of things to be angry about. But
yeah. I think also, the term Creole again, understanding that it has there are a lot of aspects to that culture, and that really is the New Orleans area culture. I mean, it really speaks to a lot of different aspects. You got the food, you got the music. I mean, the melting pot of peoples that are there, and I can't imagine designating it otherwise, but
well, our Caribbean ancestors.
yes,
And to go a
yes.
step further, the banjo was brought here by black people, by
Mm,
African people. This is an African instrument that has evolved into what it is now. And when I was growing up, nobody even thought we learned to hate it. I used to tell when I started playing it, I said it's amazing how one group of people can make another group of people hate something that actually belongs to them. Welcome to marketing.
right, right, right.
You know?
Let me read a couple of comments that were typed into the chat. Wally had a comment that he was grateful to hear so many New Orleans players like Don who've written and recorded new material in the more traditional or early jazz styles. He mentioned your Blue Book album. He mentions Tim Laughlin, Evan Christopher, Matt Perrine, Panama Jazz Band, just great music, which it all is. Denise also mentioned, talking about the European thing, there is a long tradition of jazz performers getting more respect in Europe and some of the Asian countries, Japan. It's definitely a different kind of thing there. Um, and then Ed had a question. Uh, Ed, this might be a can of worms. What are some of your favorite novelty or body songs?
Hmm. I don't know. I'm not. Uh, it doesn't excite me to sing bawdy. Is that kind of like what, like vulgar or
Well,
like
I mean, I think the novelty
what
funny ones, I think, are
funny ones? I
yeah.
don't know. I don't. I'm sorry. I can't answer that one. I don't really know any. Maybe I know and I don't realize it. But
Don, I think
Sister Kate.
she might be talking about the double entendre type tunes.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly. That kind of stuff, I think, is
okay.
more what he's referencing. Yeah.
That's what it
I
was.
leave that to the singers, usually. They'll say, I'll back them up. I'll sing background on them. But usually the singers have one. I know I played a gig with Annie St. John, and she's talking about this military man who liked to attack her from behind. I mean,
Wally
but
just
I mean,
commented that Alberta Hunter was naughty.
yeah, I mean, that's cool with me. I think it's playful. I like all of them actually. I'm cool. I'm
Harry
not that
Shearer,
kind of singer, but
Harry Shearer's wife has had a couple of recent albums, and they are definitely a throwback to that era where you know you listen to the music and you can discern within your mind, oh well, this is what she's actually talking about, but because of the contemporary standards, we can't be more brute about what we're
right.
going to sing about in the tune.
Yeah, I got you.
We've got
Yeah,
time.
well,
We
you
got
know,
time for maybe one or two other questions. So I'm just gonna do One more ask if anybody has a question or a comment they want to bring up. While people are thinking, I'm going to do a quick little thank you shout out to Sandra Smith and Elizabeth Knightley, who both sponsored tonight's presentation. So big old thank you to them and to everybody who paid for donation tickets to help offset the cost of our program. We're a small jazz club, and that's what keeps us going and providing these fun little talks each month. All right. Anybody else? Anybody else? Going once, going
Oh
twice.
man, I gotta tell you, you're talking about those kinds of songs, and one just came to mind that we did from Buddy Bolden. All the whores like the way I walk. You ever hear that? I, we did that in Boston. It's like all the whores like the way I walk, the way I walk, yeah, the way I walk, that kind of thing. All the whores like the way I walk. And I remember the drummer. He's like, man, I play in church. I can't sing that.
That,
I'm
that,
like,
that,
okay, bro.
To give a plug for the next edition of the Potomac River Jazz Club's presentation.
I,
And it's going to be a performance by uh, a lady. I had the opportunity to MC her performances on several different days at the Syracuse Jazz Festival this past summer. And her name is Gunhill Carling. And if you haven't seen good live talent, I would definitely recommend that you put the 9th of December on your calendar to be in attendance when she comes on for this particular presentation. Very, outstanding performer. She's knowledgeable. Her diversity of presentation and her capability on numerous instruments is just unbelievable. So put it on your calendar. It's going to be December the 9th. And just like you're on the concert list tonight, we look forward to seeing you on the 9th of December.
I really appreciate that shout out. Gunhild is amazing. She like Don has just like an amazing personality. So I really enjoy her, and I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, she does sometimes do it while tap dancing less. You're right. We did have one more question in the chat, Don. We're gonna wrap up with this one. Robert is curious how early jazz might be reflected in European jazz.
Um, it's I thought it was amazing how some of the I've toured with some German bands, and they were they basically had kind of a dictator at that moment, and they were New Orleans jazz is just it got all over the world. And the only thing I remember the guys telling me, the only thing they had to listen to was some of the British bands, and I think it was Chris something. I can't think right now, but um, which is a good band. But then they got to hear a New Orleans band, and the tempo was different, and the feel was a little different, and it really threw them. And they thought, "Wow, this is the real deal," kind of thing. But it's a Chris Barber. Thank you, Wally. Appreciate that, Chris Barber. And I got some stories too about that, but I should leave that. But yeah, I think there's a lot of great players in Europe. In fact, my band on the Blue Book of Storyville is two of the guys are from London, and one is from France, and he's I think half Australian. So, but it's like they learn to play by living inside of this style of music. And there's a lot of opportunity for this style of music in Europe, in Denmark. I mean, it's, I will say the audience is getting older. The median age is getting older, and young people aren't picking up on it as much as you would hope. But it's I'm not going to give up on it because no matter what kind of music we're going to play for in the remainder of my life, I'm going to always include something that's New Orleans or New Orleans, feel like New Orleans jazz for me because I just think there's a place for it in everything, everywhere, everything. So I hope that answered you.
Awesome answer and awesome wrap to our evening, I think. Thank you so much for giving us your time and all of that wonderful information, Don. We really appreciate you. And thanks to everybody who attended. And Michael did a great talk up for our December session, so I'm going to leave it at that. But you can either follow us on Eventbrite to get notified when we post new events, and or check our website at prjc.org, and we do have stuff on Facebook too. So any of those places you'll be able to find information about future talks, and got some fun stuff I'm trying to line up for next year. So thanks to everybody, and have a lovely evening.
All right,
Night.
I'll just keep playing if you want to leave it on a minute.
I'll leave it a minute. Okay, sure.
Yeah, a little Sam Morgan band, Bogalusa Strut.
Awesome.
So thanks for inviting me, and
Thank you.
I hope it was worth your time to hang out here. So,
Absolutely.
and we miss you, Mr. Gourier. We missed you in New Orleans, bruh.
Night.
I know he's talking to me. I know what you're saying, bro. I can't hear you, but bye.